Okay, so we went over so far in the lessons dexterity, the need for dexterity, the need to draw abstract lines and shapes and being able to warm up that way. And a lot of you are probably kind of getting the gist of that. I'm sure you're hopefully doing what I was mentioning, which is to warm up 10-15 minutes before you do any substantial amount of training or drawing exercises. A good time to think also about, to keep in your mind, is how long should you train for at intervals. I think 20 to 30 minutes at a time. You may want to get a cheap timer to time yourself. Is not a bad idea, but then also making chunks of about 2 to 3 hours. It takes me about a half an hour to an hour just to warm up. Then the second hour I'm training is about starting to absorb and digest repetitious information. So I'm starting to try to commit to memory what I'm studying. And then after that, we go into the last hour where you're actually pretty warmed up and you start to actually retain information at a greater rate. So I would say try to shoot for 3 hours, but this is, again, what I'd like to talk about now is kind of some basic shapes, expanding on the last lesson, which had to do with, values, and we did a little bit of shapes and filled them in and things of that sort. But almost any complex form that you're going to end up drawing, I don't care if it's a car, a train, plane, spacecraft, invented spacecraft, concepting, visual development stuff, it's going to be based on breaking down the forms into simple geometry. The human body is primarily composed of spheres and elongated ovals and cylinders and things of that sort. If you were to think of the generic mannequin that we sometimes see at art stores, where they're little wooden mannequin, they're not the greatest looking things, but they do break down the body into the most simplistic explanation geometrically. If you think of a car or creating a wheel in perspective, you first create a square in perspective, and then you bisect, you cut it in the corners and basically split it, and then you actually draw the ellipse of the wheel into that box. We can take complicated forms and break them down geometrically and then build them back up in complexity. So we want to kind of talk a little bit more about that. I'm not going to get into heavy perspective stuff right now. We'll do that at a later date. On a later lesson, we'll get into doing, bisecting and constructing and measuring devices in perspective and things of that sort. But right now, let me take a seat, and we'll just draw I'll kind of show you maybe a little demonstration of drawing, like, say, some geometric forms cleanly that will comprise to make a generic, like, standing figure, say in profile or something. And again, look at how my hand moves on the paper, and look how it kind of is constantly relaxed. Okay, we've got another more circle for the pelvic section. We've got more of an egg or an ellipse for the actual rib cage. We've kind of triangularly squared off on top of the oval that we drew the chin. We've put a small cylinder in for the neck, inserting into the upper region of the neck shoulder area. We can have an elongated oval more or less for the quadricep. We can do a nice sweeping line again on top of each other. Sweeping, 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 kind of working our way down the form. Make that head just a little larger, and then we can put the calf on, and we can kind of find the ground. So as you're just drawing, constantly geometry is going to be prevalent, regardless of whether you want it to be or not or whatever. You've got to somehow get something on your page that means something. And basic shapes, basic building blocks are going to be the essence of that. And so as I kind of sculpt this little tiny indication drawing of an invented figure in profile, I'm simply using small geometric shapes to create this little wireframe, carving off the shapes, adding little geometric shapes on top, and creating a little template of geometry that represents, on a flat surface, a figure. Now again, we're going to get into anatomy down the road, really a lot of anatomy. It's one of my favorite areas of study. I know it's the bane of most people's study in art, but I have found ways to make it really fun and exciting, and ultimately it's one of the hardest areas of study that an artist has to confront in their development as becoming a proficient artist. All these fundamentals that we're talking about are building blocks that will get progressively more complex as we create these, these new layers of information and knowledge that we're building. So comprised in this little demonstration here are spheres, cylinders, geometric triangular shapes, all kinds of basic shapes. And what we want to focus on is cleanliness. If I was coming down this thing again, on down that arm, trying to, like that, I mean, we would have so much cleanup to do before we could ever get anything to read. It'd be ridiculous. So, on the body, you won't find as many, say, probably triangular shapes. You'll find a lot of that in drapery. Drapery will become heavily, the triangle becomes heavily prevalent in indication of drapery. So, but you will see these angled kind of shapes that are somewhat, again, if you were to think of the arm as just a paper towel roll, and then the upper arm also, and it basically goes from larger to smaller as it ramps down that arm, and we have to somehow geometrically break that down. Then that's kind of what I've been doing and kind of what we're talking about a little bit here. We will hear this same explanation as we spill over into different disciplines, different ways of training. But look at how efficient and effective the hand is moving. The mind wants something, the hand delivers it. When you're first starting, you're going to find that your hand and your eye will constantly be in conflict with each other. The hand will not have caught up with what the eye can understand, hence creating, frustration. And that, all of us have been through that. But ultimately, your hand and eye will find a balance and will become finely tuned like an instrument, and you will be able to wield all kinds of different techniques and methods and materials with proficiency. And as you run into situations where you want to different jobs, different things that you might want to apply your knowledge to, you're going to find that these fundamentals will become the building blocks of everything that you're going to be dealing with in the most advanced, concepting, visual development. Again, whether you work in the game industry, the movie industry, whether you work entertainment industry in general, book covers, illustration, graphic novels, storyboarding. I can list so many things that are applicable to this kind of use. And then the basic shading that we just talked about in values, when we start kind of shading down form and creating a really nice, relaxed, say, shadow down the form, or a cast shadow where we have to pull a hard edge off onto another form. We're going to get into all this stuff. I'm just kind of giving you a little teaser of shapes and geometry and how you can use that geometry to basically draw organic objects, people, things, trees, planes, car, whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. We're going to get into all that, and you're going to start seeing the common denominators amongst all these shape recognition, shape-driven basic shapes that we are going to constantly need to practice the art of drawing clean ovals. Again, that's why I'm trying to show you in practical terms why I'm getting you to sit down at the beginning of each training session and draw simple geometric shapes. Get used to drawing cylinders freehand, drawing ovals, splitting the ovals, putting the eye line in, turning this into, again, an explanation for breaking down the head into a box, where you can start to kind of see how we're starting to kind of, basically create. There's so many uses, again, for geometric interpretation that we can't underestimate the value of what that means to be good at geometrically explaining complex form in the simplest root shapes, ultimately creating an incredibly powerful arsenal of technique to draw the most complex objects even out of our head. And a lot of times you will find ultimately that as you get further into your art training, that you'll just be continuing to layer these complex or simple concepts in. All of a sudden they become complex, and you say, wow, you know, the most complex narrative storytelling piece that you'll see in the Louvre, the Musée d'Orsay, any of these great museums, were broken down at some point. Some guy had to sketch that out, come up with the idea, break up this pictorial space into geometric, you know, spaces that need to be filled with objects and things, and ultimately compiled those to build this magnificent magnus opus, this magnificent effort. And it all started from shape recognition, shapes, basic shapes. Okay? So let's keep that in mind as we move forward.